So you talk about your dad and your grandfather's business, the oil industry. Was that the entire industry had a, how does that happen? Like, I have no idea. I watched Dallas growing up, but that's about the extent of my knowledge of the oil business.
Yeah.
So like, how does that happen? How does the industry have those moments?
Well, it's just supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, world supply, world demand. And so it was just a period in the early 80s when a lot of technology was coming on worldwide, and just the production, just worldwide production, just really, really ramped up. So the price just fell out of the bottom of it. And so a lot of people, a lot of independents, a lot of people like my dad, my granddad had a lot of debt to go out and drill wells, and so when the price falls out from under you, it's not good. And that's happened 4 times since then.
Right. Yeah.
So
how do you what do you remember about that time, and how did your dad, how did your grandfather manage the challenge?
Well, I was already up here.
Right.
So I didn't feel their pain as much, but I know for me it was scary because originally I came here, had a little bit of financial backing. And people think, oh, he's from Texas and they got oil money and they're right. But that wasn't the case.
Right.
So I was just, I was telling Jeff when we were going through at Hendricks the other day, there's this one little office Harry Hyde had, or this little front door, and inside the front door was a desk just out in the open shop. And I remember sitting at that front door just dialing for dollars and just trying to find sponsorship. And so it was a little scary, but I mean, that was just that.
Yeah. You were young.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You were in the middle of it.
That's right.
So you worked out of the shop over at Granddaddy's. So when does that car, that really the first car that I think kind of puts you on the map, that yellow and black number 8? What is the deal with that car?
Okay, so what happened was when I ran the first year, I ran Pocono. Mm-hmm. I met a guy there named Ed Bracefield. He worked for the Stavola Brothers, but he was a part-time announcer at Pocono. So when I qualified, after I'd started my first race, I was 17 at North Wilkesboro. When I went to qualify for Pocono, that day I turned 18. And he interviewed me, and I said, he said, how old are you? I said, I'm 18. He just really started following me. And when I got back to Robert G's, he was calling me. I mean, he was calling me at Robert G's. There was no cell phones. He's calling me every day, trying to help me get sponsors. Robert G's, this guy's on the phone again. And, he convinced the Stavolas to sponsor me the next year at Pocono.
What were the Stavola Brothers doing in NASCAR before that?
Nothing.
Nothing.
These guys didn't even know what a NASCAR was.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's right. And this guy at Bracefield talked them into sponsoring me. So we went to Pocono, and Stavola said to me after the race, how much do I get of the purse and how much do you get? And I said, well, typically the owner and driver split it. So if you were the car owner, you'd get 60 and I'd get 40. But I'm the car owner and I'm the driver, so I get it all.
Right.
And he looked at me and said, well, what if I became the owner? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, you'd get 60, I'd get 40. He said, well, how much would you sell me all your stuff and I could become the owner? And I wrote a number down on a piece of paper and I gave it to him. He looked at it. He scratched that number out and wrote another number down. And he gave it to me. And I said, you got a deal.
What was the number?
I think I had written down 90,000,
wow.
Which was a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much did you have? You had the box truck, the car?
The box truck, the car, 2 Randy Dorton engines.
Oh, man. That's like way more than 90 grand.
A handful of gears.
Yeah.
He wrote the number 60,000 down.
Oh, wow.
And I took the 60,000 and he became my car owner.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You were going to keep on racing, so. Right?
Yeah.
That's how you justified it?
That's right.
So he becomes a car owner and he owns the stuff. What changed? Anything?
Well, we went and found a shop, and he bought some property, and which became the Stavola Brothers shop. And I helped find it, just looking around and
who is helping? Is anyone helping you besides yourself?
Not really at that time.
Who's the crew chief?
Well, we didn't really have one. It was just I was talking to different people. I can't remember, but at that time, and I can't remember why, but me and Norman Negree were kind of butting heads a little bit at that time. We had something, and I can't remember what it was, and we're friends today, but I hadn't talked to him in a while. But I think somebody said you need to go hire Frog Fagan. I don't know if you remember that name, but he had worked for Osterland, and so he was kind of the first guy to help kind of organize, and he was the first crew chief, and we just kind of built from there.
Okay.
Just me trying to meet people and just trying to like pull it all in.
Yeah. And so Stavola Brothers, that's how it began. Right out of the the sale of your cars, your team, buying the shop. You were going to how long was the relation? How long was the contract with Stavola?
Well, there was no contract.
No contract.
No, I remember one time I tell this funny. When contracts were becoming a big deal, we were at Bristol one day. It was a rain delay, and Stavola said to me, "Hey," remember he's in the concrete business and he's in the rock business. He said, "Hey, we don't need a contract." He says, "If you leave, I'm going to put a contract on you." He was joking, but you're always kind of wondering. But so we didn't have a contract, and that's how that worked.
So how do you explain? So you start the Stavola Brother race team. Bobby Allison joins the team, right?
Yeah.
When is that? 1984 or 5?
86.
Right. So you're there. The team's kind of building itself around.
Yeah,
you.
we were in a limited schedule in 85, and he came on in 86.
And so now there's a teammate, which wasn't too foreign. I know. So back in the day, we talked about it on the show several times. Darrell Waltrip, Dad, even in the 90s, like hated to have a teammate. Thought, why would I want to share the focus and the drive of this team and the goal of this team with another driver? That just was it the same way? I mean, I'm sure it was the same way for you and Bobby.
You got to remember, it was no two-car team.
Right.
Stavola owned 2 race teams.
Yeah,
had one sponsor, but they had 2 race teams. And looking back, you see things a lot differently than at the time. But it was very difficult. It made things more difficult for me. It was just a tough situation.
Yeah. So what were some of the challenges? I know Bobby has years of experience and he brings a lot of great things to the table. But I remember just watching some stuff here in the past about documenting Stavola Brothers and so forth. There was a lack of communication between the two teams. They weren't even really almost in the same property. Like they were two, like you say, 2 separate race teams.
Yeah.
How did so you were in the original building?
Yeah.
Bobby's team comes along, and then they're in the whole nother shop.
Right.
Was it miles away?
No. It was
hundreds of feet.
Yeah, hundreds of feet. Yeah.
And still.
Yeah, across the parking lot.
And why could you not get the level of communication you were seeking for? Why? What was the reasons? Because the teams.
Well, obviously everybody's competitive.
Yeah.
Bobby's competitive. His guys are competitive. What was frustrating was that our guys at this time, nobody's really doing this, but our guys started building the car from scratch with their own, pickup points and all that stuff. So Bobby was still using Laughlin chassis, and so it was just there was no
comparison.
Compare the two.
Yeah.
And so we just really struggled with that for a few years.
Yeah.
And everybody starts losing confidence. And once you start losing confidence, I mean, whether it's a driver, whether it's a team, whether it's kind of everything, it just kind of goes down, goes downhill from there. Yeah. Before
we go through that, I wanted to ask you about that 1986 win at Talladega.
Yeah.
22 years old. Obviously, one of the funny things that Dad told me when I won my first race, he came in and stuck his head in the window of the car and said, "Make sure you enjoy this." He was like emphatic.
Yeah, that's great.
He was trying to shake me out of the moment to get my attention and go, "Hey, enjoy this, and you don't get to do this tomorrow."
That's great.
It's over.
That's the best advice he could have given you.
What was your day like after you crossed the finish line?
I mean, I enjoyed it like for a few hours, and then it was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
When you go back to the shop, is there a change in the morale? Is there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Everybody's pumped up. Everybody's pumped up. Everybody's everything. For me personally, though, it was like, okay, I gotta go. I gotta do better. I gotta do, it's just I didn't really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I was just too intense. It was just my personality.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, how does your relationship with Stavola sort of unravel? How does it come to an end?
Well, we just keep struggling. You go through 87, you go through 88, and then, by this time Harry Hyde's leaving Hendrick.
Yep.
Or however they're divorcing.
Yeah.
And we get him to come over, and it was good, except it wasn't, because it was the introduction of radial tires. And so, everybody was struggling with that. But with all that said, I probably had my best year in 1990, and we were running competitive. Your dad and I were over half a lap ahead of everybody in the Pepsi 400, and that was before pit road speed.
Yeah.
And he pits, and they say, well, we're going to keep you out to lead a lap, which I didn't want to do that. I want to pit with him. And so I'm out there by myself for a lap, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to let him beat me down pit road.
Right.
So I come flying down pit road, and a lot of the things, we were trying those new thin rotors, all these things with the brakes. They didn't work. So when we didn't realize this until I went down pit road that first time. All I had was rear brakes.
Oh,
so I'm coming down pit road. Every time I hit the brakes, the car does this. So I'm on and off the brakes. The car's doing this all the way. And I finally get to my pit stop. I had no choice but to loop it around.
Yeah.
And so then I had to drive around again. Long story, we finished fourth in that race.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was kind of like my best year, but it was also the year I got hurt. So
what happened?
We were running fourth in Charlotte, hit the wall head on with the equalized tire, sever my long thoracic nerve back here, broke my shoulder blade, and my neck was never the same.
Yeah.
After that, and it's years I struggled with that.
What kind of issues does that give you? What kind of can you describe sensations or symptoms?
Yeah, like severe headache.
Mm-hmm.
Can't turn your neck. That's just two. I mean,
yeah.
Severe headache and can't turn your neck.
And that's just the nerve damage.
And it would happen. What would happen is it would happen to me, and I'd go to chiropractors. I'd do all these different things. I went to see Dr. Petty again. They couldn't find anything neurologically.
Sure.
But after maybe 3 weeks, it would kind of all of a sudden loosen back up, and then I would do something. A month later, and it would happen all over again. And it would last 3 weeks or a month.
Yeah.
And that just kind of kept repeating itself.